Today we are introduced to the sci-fi movie, Passenger, which was released in 2016. This film reminds me of another sci-fi movie, Deep Space Amnesia. It's also a story that takes place on the interstellar migration journey, just Deep Space Amnesia more dark and scary. Let's take a look. In the vast space, the Avalon starship is making its way to colonial planet Homestead 2. The ship reached 50% of the speed of light. The forward energy shield in front of the spacecraft can withstand the impact of meteorites on the way forward. It allowed 258 crew members and 5,000 passengers to spend the long journey in the sleeping cabin. But then the spacecraft entered a dense asteroid belt. A boulder then crashed head-on into the ship. The violent collision caused the ship's interior to vibrate. Several fusion reactors were also damaged, although the system automatically fixes some of the faults. An asteroid collision damages the ship and causes its computer to awaken one passenger, mechanical engineer Jim Preston. The smart wizard in the holographic screen also follows the program settings to tell him the 120-year journey has come to an end. They are about to arrive at colonial planet Homestead 2. Jim was excited about it, but he soon found that the ship's hull was empty. So Jim quickly came to the office. Yet there is still no one here. In a panic, Jim had to follow the instructions and go to the bridge where the captain was. But he looked through the window, only to find that there was no one in the bridge. It was only then that he realized that he might be the only passenger to wake up on the ship, and Jim came back to the viewing platform. After questioning, he finally learned. The ship has only been in operation for 30 years. It will be 90 years before you reach your destination. Jim was shocked by the truth. He quickly sent a message to the Earth. But to his despair, it would be 19 years before the news reached Earth. And it will take at least 55 years to receive the response. Jim's brain was blank in an instant. But as he passed the bar, he found a bartender. So he immediately sped past. But the bartender is just a robot named Arthur. Jim didn't want to sit down. He tried to repair the hibernation. It nearly killed himself in it. Then he used a lot of tools to pry open the bridge. But in the end it was the same failure, which made Jim miserable. But in a chat with bartender Arthur, frustrated Jim was suddenly inspired. So he decided to enjoy the moment. He then pried open the superior suite and stayed in. Then he began to play again. Enjoy ingested food, but after the madness, is still a huge loneliness and emptiness. The desperate Jim then came to the ship's sightseeing platform. The vast universe is just around the corner, quiet and deep. So Jim jumped down. Let yourself float in this empty darkness. He thought of his helpless situation. Not only left a sad tears, the small body also drowned under the stars. Jim took off his spacesuit after returning to the ship, was desperate for death. He tried to throw himself into the cold space. But the human instinct to survive still let Jim run back. He also fell in a panic. As a result, he saw a woman who made him feel. He watched her aura's profile by searching. Jim knew that he was a writer. And everything about him fascinates Jim. So Jim began to have evil thoughts. He wanted to wake her aura. Although after some intense ideological struggle, Jim has decided to give up his evil idea. But the terrible loneliness and emptiness eventually reviving Aurora for companionship. He watched her aura wake up slowly. A panicked Jim quickly ran back to the room. His heart could not be calm for a long time. After that, Jim pretends to have a chance encounter with her aura, and told her the reality they would face. Aurora was terrified to learn the truth. She always tried to continue sleeping. But Jim told Aurora that the hibernation could only remain dormant. Entering sleep requires special equipment. However, Aurora still doesn't want to give up. He continued to look for ways to get into hibernation. After a period of trying, Aurora gradually gave up hope. And finally accepted the reality. She also slowly began to get along with Jim. They two confided in each other. Jim also learned from the conversation that her aura wasn't starting over for a different environment. She bought a round-trip ticket. After living on planet Homestead 2 for a year, he will return to Earth. And then she will have a unique story. It will even become a beloved writer. But the harsh reality shattered her dreams. Aurora can only choose to have timely fun. She danced with Jim and played basketball together, and the two became regulars in the cinema. There was also laughter in the bar. Aurora then accepted Jim's confession. The relationship between the two began dating also grew. Jim also took Aurora to the tour deck in his spacesuit. Let her appreciate the vast and deep universe. After turning off their respective magnetic shoes, the two drifted into the deep space again, and Aurora was surrounded by endless romance. After that, he fell in love with Jim. The two then let go of themselves and began a happy life. They lingered in an empty restaurant in the ship's watch area, watched the dazzling bighorns together, and cling to each other in this magnificent and unusual sight. On Aurora's birthday, Jim finally decided to propose to her. But bartender Arthur tells the truth about Jim's awakening of Aurora. This left Aurora in an instant crash. Jim's deception made her crazy. She could not believe that her lover was the perpetrator of the disaster. Originally like glue paint two people, in a blink of an eye, it looks like a stranger. But the more terrible things are not on the way. There was a serious failure of the ship's system. There is no automatic repair at all. But Jim and Aurora had no idea. One of them continues to grieve, and one is still trying to get the other's forgiveness. Jim even put a small tree species into the ship's lobby. This makes Aurora happy that it hasn't been close to nature for a long time. However, due to system failure is getting worse. The machines in the restaurant also began to fail. The elevator is stuck in half the sky. Suddenly, there was the voice of Chief Deck Officer, Gus Mancuso on the radio. They too hear the news and came immediately told him the status quo. Gus quickly took them into the bridge. But Gus was failed to find the fault log in the system. It was also he who assigned two people to the technical station to manually collect fault data. And because Gus has a physical problem, he has to go back to rest first. But that night, the ship's gravity engine suddenly malfunctioned. This caused Aurora, who was still swimming, to float with the water in the pool. Aurora is in danger in this huge water polo. I'm drowning and dying. Fortunately, the ship soon regained its gravity system. The big water polo wrapped around Aurora fell. Aurora and Jim then quickly found Gus. But Gus looked at the hologram of the ship had failure that began 2 years ago. I also felt unable to start. And his health is getting worse. After testing, they too know that Gus's hibernation had been faulty. This caused him to have multiple organ failure steam throughout his body. It's going to come to the end of him life. Before he died, Gus handed Jim his identity bracelet. And hopefully Jim will find the fault and fix the ship. So they too then came to the main turbine room, constantly testing the various technical stations. But in the process, they pried open a door that could not be opened. As a result, Aurora was instantly sucked into the area and suffered a meteorite impact, resulting in cabin loss of pressure. Jim quickly kicks the controller to Aurora. Let him use the controller to seal the hole. 2 people escaped. But Jim then saw that the meteorite ran through multiple chambers. So they followed it all the way and found that the reactor's control computer had been damaged by a meteorite. However, just after Jim replaced the computer with spare parts, they found that the reactor could not properly exhaust. The exhaust valve must be opened outside the ship. Otherwise the whole ship will be destroyed. Jim put on a spacesuit and came out of the ship to prevent the disaster. But this time, he had to get stuck in the switch to keep the exhaust valve open. Aurora knew it meant Jim would be engulfed by the flames. She couldn't bear it at all. But the reactor is about to explode, and the ship is about to be destroyed. So Aurora could only bear the pain of pulling down the exhaust gate. In a flash, the blazing flames stooped toward Jim and sprayed him out of the ship. The reactor was then successfully restarted. Jim, who lost its safety rope, drifted further and further. His spacesuit was also losing pressure because of the break. So he used his last bit to apologize to Aurora and tell her about his love for her. But Aurora is not willing to give up. He then put on his spacesuit and rushed out to successfully catch the unconscious Jim. Then she used the medical warehouse to save Jim's life. The two also kissed each other fondly again. But Jim later told Aurora that the medical chamber could put her back to sleep, so she could fulfill her dream. But Aurora chose to stay and accepted Jim's proposal marriage. After 88 years, the ship is about to arrive at planet Homestead 2. The awakened crew also saw a ship hall filled with green plants and bird-like flowers. Although Jim and Aurora did not reach the end of the trip, but they two loved ones had a wonderful and happy life on this interstellar journey.